Welcome back to Eagles Power Hour. We are live for the first time since Kylor did it kind of randomly one day for a while ago. So I figured out how to make it work, and I realized now it was a lot easier than I thought, and I was over intimidated. Should have been doing this all year. But we are joined by the founder, Kylor Neale. Kylor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I mean, it's a bummer football season's over for us, but it is what it is. We still got FCS playoffs to watch. So, yeah, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing all right. It's been a kind of a fun day watching the whole Selection Sunday stuff go on, and it makes you miss being in the conversation and like
Really
having a
does.
reason to argue online about your team's seed. Because I mean, the last time we did that was 2021,
Yeah.
which
And it was good arguments.
yeah, it was good arguments, but you know we're here after another lackluster season, and we're recapping the football season again. And I just there's one big thing that a lot of people were wondering about the program is just the future of the leadership of the program, right? And maybe it wasn't like obvious to people, like, hey, Coach Best, 3 years, he's gone. Well, we were all under the assumption that, or the last thing that was posted on the Eastern website was Coach Best's contract expires at the end of the 2024 football season. That is what is posted online. Turns out that is not 100% true. So he did sign through 2024, but there was a rollover clause in that contract, which basically it's like almost like a kind of like a club option, sort of. They can either be incentive based, or your athletic director can just kind of have free reign and be like, hey, we want to take this option, we don't want to take this option. Not 100% sure which way it is for Eastern, if it's an incentive based thing or not. But there was rollover years in Coach Best's contract, and it was exercised twice. Now, the two times that they were exercised were in after the 2021 playoff run, and then after the 2022 football season. Both were done by Lynn Hickey. That's important. But what that means is Coach Best's contract does not expire at the end of this year. It expires at the end of the 2027 football season. It actually expires in like February 2028. So that is an important difference, obviously, for us looking at, hey, like, is Coach Best going to be the coach next year? Yes, he is obviously going to be the coach this year. Dan Thompson came out with an article that was great. He sat down with Tim Collins and kind of talked about the situation. Tim was like, yeah, Coach Best is our guy. So when you heard me or maybe other Big Sky folks talking about, like, it's probably a different coach next year, we had the assumption that his contract was expiring at the end of the year and he hadn't been extended, because there was no public, like, yeah, Coach Best has been extended. Turns out they didn't have to extend them because of those rollover years. All that being said, Coach Best is our guy moving forward, right? So, kind of, what are your thoughts on this situation, Kylor? Because I know me and you have both like had mixed feelings about it. Some, like, three
Yeah.
losing seasons, you get frustrated, but like we all love Coach Best, right? So how are
Yeah.
you feeling about it?
I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to ever find a bigger E than Coach Best, right? You're never going to find another person more passionate about the program than Coach Best. That's just a reality. I mean, again, he's been here his whole life. He cares more than any other coach we're going to bring. And he is one of those coaches where I think if you give him an opportunity, he's never going to leave, right? And that's rare to see in this day and age. That's rare to see at this level of football. So that's like kind of the cool, promising things. And he actually has recruited fairly well at the end of the day, right? And he's kept the locker room together in the age of the transfer portal. I mean, we have really good teams that get gutted quite a bit heavier than what we do, right? I mean, we see that in basketball every single year now. The whole locker room gets gutted every single year, and we got to rebuild every single year. We haven't really had to do that with the football program, and it's been kind of cool to see in an age of gutting and rebuilding and gutting and rebuilding. I mean, North Dakota State has, I feel like they had more transfers than us. They're a powerhouse. They got money. They have NIL deals. So, I mean, there are some positives of keeping Best. It is kind of weird that I feel like it was hidden from us, this kind of rollover thing. But my main take from this is, I mean, he's our guy, right? We have him until at least the 27th, and I hope he continues to turn it around, right? I mean, that's the hope. If you're an Eastern fan, you just want him to get better. So at the end of the day, we can't dwell on it. At least we have an answer. We have an answer, but My biggest thing is if you're one of those fans that's continuing to complain, but you're not donating, shame on you, right? At the end of the day, Coach Best is probably bringing this program to where this program deserves to be. And I hate to be that honest, but this is a program that has been very lowly funded. This is a program that has no fans in the stands, right? I mean, yeah, in the Bo Baldwin years, we got spoiled. We're not the top funded program in the Big Sky, yet we were dominating. No, we were one of the worst funded programs in the Big Sky with not the best support and the worst facilities outside of Northern Colorado. So in the reality, this is kind of where we should be. Even maybe a 4-win season is probably overperforming in the grand scheme of things. So you know what, Aaron Bessie's had some success, but again, if you're not donating thousands of dollars a year, why are you complaining? If you're not showing up to games, why are you complaining? At the end of the day, there's people like you, Patrick, who go to every single game. That's beautiful, right? I can't. I live far away, but I drove 7 hours one way to go see an away game. One night, stayed the night, drove back, right? Watched Southeastern Louisiana. But I donate. Most people who are complaining are not opening up their pocketbooks. Most people who are complaining aren't trying to change. So at the end of the day, if you really want this program to get better, what are you doing to get this program better? I mean, that's kind of my whole mindset to this is I'm tired of the negativity if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is. Now, if you are a big donor and you're crushing it, you're going to all the games, you're supporting them, you're online, you're vocal, and you're donating, cool, you can complain. At the end of the day, I totally understand. You can complain. You and I are frustrated watching this.
Right. Yeah.
Season. I mean, we're texting, we're going, oh, man, what do you think? How do you feel about this game? How did you feel after the game? Right? We're frustrated. But at the end of the day, we're still going to support them. Again, you're out there every single day. I'm doing my best to open up my pocketbook. It's not a big pocketbook, but it's at least something. If everyone donated $25 a month, this Eastern program would be in a completely different situation. If every alumni did, we'd be killing it. If every Spokane resident went out to support, we'd be killing it. We have a lot of benefits outside of facilities and support and money being where we are. There's not a lot of competition for recruiting, and Washington is one of the best areas on the West Coast for recruiting talent. So that's awesome. We have a crazy tradition, which is pretty insane compared to our disadvantages. And we're right next to a pretty large city. I mean, outside of, I don't know, is Spokane bigger than Salt Lake? Probably not, but it's close. I mean, outside of Sacramento, who has a bigger market than Eastern in the Big Sky? Not anyone. So it's kind of a bummer to see the lack of support and the lack of funds when we have, the ability to turn it on. But again, if you're a fan, put your money where your mouth is. If you want to see change, put your money where your mouth is. In the era of NIL, why would you want to come to play at Eastern? Right? It's I loved chatting with Efton Chisholm in Frisco. And the first thing I asked him is, hey, man, you coming back next year? And he just smiled because it was such a blunt question. But I went, if I'm you, why would you? Right? I'm sure you got bigger offers. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm coming back. We got unfinished business. And that's cool to see because we didn't offer him anything for him to show back up. So, again, if you want better recruits, if you want to develop talent, put your money where your mouth is, help fund this program to where we can compete. Because right now, it keeps getting worse every single year. I mean, at the end of the day, we're no better than Northern Colorado in terms of funding. Now, their athletic program is actually more funded than ours. But there was one thing that was promising, at least for people who aren't aware, because I talked to Tim Collins and a few people at the Southeastern Louisiana game. Last year's athletic budget was $12 million. This year's, it's closer to $21 million. That is awesome. That means the program, the administration is ready to invest. We only need to raise $13 million to have a new stadium. That's all we need to do. And then they're going to cop the rest. They're basically going to fund it through, games and other expenses. So we just need $13 million. If we can't do that, we don't deserve to have a program. Because any program at the FCS level, if they just say, hey, we need $13 million to get a brand new stadium, that stuff's done in a year. So again, if you're fans and you're frustrated and you're complaining, put your money where your mouth is, or else nothing's going to get better, and then you don't have a right to complain. So sorry, that was my soapbox speech, but I mean that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm tired of the negativity without the action.
Right, and I'm kind of in the same place, man. Like cool. You've been frustrated with some of the results the last 3 years, but it's like you said, like what reason are we giving kids and I mean hell prospective coaches, assistant coaches, like a big problem with the program the last couple of years has been like assistants are just in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, but not because they're being hired for being good assistants. They're just in and out because they could well, they are kind of being hired for that. But
Yeah.
the paycheck at Eastern Washington to be an assistant football coach is very, very good. And if you go to another like a neighboring Big Sky school, you can sometimes increase your paycheck by like 50%. Like it is insane the like differences in paychecks between example a Montana, an Idaho, and
Right.
Eastern right now.
Yeah.
And if we have to be able to fund the program to keep quality assistant coaches because I think the assistant coaches sometimes like a coordinator or assistant coaches are just as important as a head man sometimes.
Especially when it's developing over a long
Exactly.
period of time. You're recruiting a guy for a specific reason, yet you're not going to be there to watch the development.
Which is, it's just so important in this day and age. And so, like you said, you got to donate. We got to get the funding up, get a new stadium, get some excitement around the program again.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard. It's really hard to build momentum when there's not really support behind you.
I mean, let me ask you a question because you went to all the games this year, right? And I applaud you for doing it. How many times were you excited in the stands?
Oh,
One game?
okay.
I mean, for like the atmosphere.
Right.
For the atmosphere.
I'd say 3 games. The Monmouth game was
Yeah.
there was a little bit of buzz there, and it was fun to see the program or
Right.
see the team like see that improvement we were hoping for.
For
The
sure.
Montana game was just wild.
Yeah.
That game was insane, and the environment was awesome. And then the Montana or the Davis game was pretty fun too, but that's homecoming.
Yeah,
So
homecoming, right? It's always going to be at least packed. But then you look at the other games, and we had a lot of games where we were bringing these top tier recruits to a visit.
yeah,
Because here's my second question. If you're one of those recruits and you're going in front of a Big Sky stadium that maybe has 1,000, 1,500 people in the stands, and then you have an Idaho that's recruiting, you have an Idaho State, you have a Northern Arizona, you have a Weber State, and you have the Montana schools. Are you picking us? I mean, you have to love the coaches and program and legacy to pick us in that regards, because it's a tough sell when there's no support. So if you want the team to get better and get better talent, show up, right? Show up. It's a big thing.
One of the big like I remember the Montana State game. Our student section got invaded by Montana State. Got taken over, dude. And that type of thing is luckily I don't think recruits exactly know where the student section is, but like if you saw that at Idaho or if you saw that at another school where their student section is normally really big, like that would be insane. Like there's a lot of little things that I just think the more support the program gets, the better the results will be, the better recruiting will be. And then like Eastern is recruiting. I know there's been some frustrations with talent on the field, but really, dude, like the recruiting classes have been good.
Yeah.
There is a lot of talent coming into this program. And I mean, these guys are recruiting to a 3-8 program with little funding and their fans don't show up. Could you imagine if the fans show up and they have some funding and some nicer, a little bit nicer stadium?
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine the ceiling of this program, right?
Completely different ballgame. A completely different. And again, we got so spoiled by overachieving. And I really do mean that. We shouldn't ever expect the seasons that we had under Bo Baldwin. Of course, I want them. I love them. But when I went to school there, it was 2007. It was coming off a 3-win season, and we lost to a Division II team in 2006. Do you think the fan base was phenomenal 2007? No. But, they started picking up. We started getting playoff wins. And then, of course, we had a phenomenal fan base throughout the 2010s. But that helped. That helps with recruits. That helps get the talent because we kept getting better when the atmosphere kept getting better. So, again, it's one of those things where I get winning brings in fans. But if you want to build success, you also have to make it exciting for people to actually get recruits, especially in the era of NIL. Right. Montana can offer people money. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know if they do, and I don't really know the difference, but you better believe there's boosters there that will go, hey, I get you're a wide receiver and you want to play at Eastern Washington because of the wide receiver legacy, but how does $25,000 a year sound? That's not out of the realm of possibility. We're not doing that. So, I mean, we have to really focus on what we can control. And I always tell this to my sales guys and my employees: control your controllables. Okay. We can't control the decision from the coach. What we can control as fans is funding. What we can control is showing up. What we can control is support. So, I mean, control your controllables. And if you're complaining, just go to the games, man. Help get recruits, get them excited. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And all right, so we do have to talk about the season because this is the season recap, right?
Fair enough.
Which I mean, I can rant about that all day long, but we got to talk about the season, man.
Okay.
4-8 football season. We'll just
Right.
walk through it here real quick. You know, we came into the season like me and you both picked winning season's bubble playoff team. That's what we expected. We looked at the schedule. We look at the schedule and we're like, hey, we probably have 3 wins in the out of conference schedule. You probably have, you have a tough conference slate, but you have, 3 pretty favorable matchups at the end of the year. If you can win 2 of those 5 in the middle, all of a sudden you're 8-4, 9-3, looking at a playoff win or a playoff team. I mean, if you're 9-3 in the Big Sky, you're. I mean, we had some controversy in the seeding today, but you're looking at a top 8 seed, right?
For sure.
So that I felt like that was probably the ceiling or what I was expecting to see from this Eagle team, like 8-ish win team.
Yeah.
Well, what we saw, I mean, Monmouth came to town. I was actually a little nervous about this game, doing some more research. Like they've always been a run heavy team. And I was like, with our history on the run side of things. And we whooped Monmouth.
Yeah.
And
we actually gave them the most difficult game they've had all year. They had an FBS win. Every single game in the CA that they lost to the top teams, they lost by like 3 to 7 points. We whooped them. It wasn't competitive.
Yeah, and it was like just an awesome offensive performance. The defense held a big offensive team to 14 points like throughout most of that game. And it was like, oh, we're back. Then the following week happened, and I'm talking like this is the most embarrassing loss I've ever felt as an Eagle fan.
Yeah, same.
And that is just insane. And I don't know. I still don't understand how that happened. I still don't understand watching the film. Like, how did this happen? I don't understand. Eastern was clearly the better team, and somehow we lose this game in overtime. Just crazy. Okay, whatever. Flush it. You still have an opportunity to, at least make some noise and have a positive season. You go to Southeast Louisiana, and man, it's just another tough loss, 1 possession game. It's another theme that we saw in 2023 where it's like those 1 possession games, we just seem to come out on the wrong side of them a lot. Then we go to Nevada, and this felt like, Nevada was awful last year. They're a better team this year, but they're still not like a dominant Mountain West team or anything like that. And we get our butts kicked, ran all over. And it was 2 straight weeks of like Eastern just got ran all over. And it was like, oh, okay, that's who we are. We are just kind of the same team as last year, it felt like. Then you go into conference play. You're hosting Montana. Huge game. I think this had to be the biggest crowd all year. Super exciting, super fun game. You lose right at the end to a top 10 team. And this was like okay, we have the talent. It just seems like we're a couple plays away. And it was like this, again, another 1 loss or 1 possession loss. It seems like that pattern again. Go to Sac State coming off the bye and beat them. And you're like, well, okay, like this Eastern team has some juice. A team that we've historically beaten a lot, UC Davis, they come to town. We compete with them. They're a top 5 seed now. Then you go to Idaho. They're a top 8 seed, and you lose by 10. You compete for most of that game. You compete with Montana State for most of the game and lose. You lose 3 straight games to top 8 seed in the playoffs by 2 possessions or less. And then, the last 3 games, you blow out Northern Colorado as you should. Idaho State was kind of a frisky matchup, but senior day was awesome. Awesome offensive possession. Awesome offensive performance. Wow. That's what I get for doing this live. Anyways. And then we played Northern Arizona, a team that I felt like we had a decent chance at going and knocking off with some momentum. And NAU was just a better team that day. They just beat us.
Yeah.
All that turns us into 4-8. 4-8 again, just not that great. And this was a season where we had the luxury of 2 home out of conference football games against other FCS schools.
Yeah.
We had the luxury of kind of a lighter schedule going into what would have been the playoffs. I don't know. What's your kind of take overall in the year, and was it a step up from last year?
I mean, it was pretty negative, right? At the end of the day, we're not going to get another 2 home games in the out of conference schedule for a very long time, unless it's like a home and home, and we just happen to schedule it at the right time. Having this where these aren't home and homes, right? These were just, we paid for these games. Southeastern Louisiana was a home and home, so that was awesome. But that's typically the Eastern motto: is we're going to do a home and home. We're going to go play another top-ranked FCS team, or play a D2 team at home, and then we play an FBS team. That's kind of what we've done historically. So looking at this out-of-conference schedule, we were super excited. I mean, this was a fairly easy out-of-conference schedule in the grand scheme of things. Monmouth, it proved it. I mean, we had the talent. Then you look at that Drake, and like you said, that was the most embarrassing loss you've seen. 100%. That's the most embarrassing loss I've seen too, because and Drake is good for a Pioneer League team, right? They're good for a Pioneer League team. That means they could be competitive in maybe the D2 playoffs. They probably could be competitive, but they're not winning the D2 playoffs. So that was pretty embarrassing at home to lose to them, especially when we were just so much better. But yeah, 4 wins is never going to be exciting. The difference from like this year compared to last year is we were competitive and outside of Nevada, and I don't really count that well, because even in 2010 we got blown out by a Mountain West team that wasn't very good. Maybe they were, I don't remember. But either way, like this will happen even to some of the good teams. Sometimes you're going to get blown out by an FBS team. It is what it is. But we were competitive in every single game. I mean, we outside of UC Davis, we gave Montana State their toughest game of the year, right? We gave UC Davis one of their tougher games. We gave Montana a really tough game. We gave Idaho a really tough game, and that was a healthy Idaho, right? That's when they got everyone back. So that wasn't like the Idaho where everyone was injured too. So when we saw like last year or the year before, we were kind of getting blown out by the top tier teams. We weren't very competitive. I get we were competitive with Montana State one year and we probably should have won, but other than that, it's like everyone else, we were getting blown out. So when you look at the future, you get kind of excited until you realize everyone's seniors. And then you're like, crap. So this was one of those times where I liked how Eastern fought. They didn't give up throughout the year. They didn't. I don't know about that. I really don't. But I think it would be competitive, which is still probably sad. I think it'd be competitive. But Patrick and I were actually having a take. Maybe we'll talk about the Pioneer League and NIL in a little bit, because if they want to be powers, they could. They're just not gonna. But yeah, it was exciting to see like the actual fight that Eastern had. They didn't give up like we saw last season at the end. They kind of gave up. They didn't give up. They wanted it. They fought. I just think sometimes if something wasn't working, like in that Southeastern Louisiana game, the run wasn't working, but the pass was beautiful while we kept running the ball, right? I don't understand. In this NAU game, the run was not working, so we kept running the ball, right? So that's the one thing that kind of frustrates me with this Eastern Washington squad, because the talent is there. We have the best wide receiver in the league. We have the most accurate quarterback in the FCS. Kiko was the most accurate quarterback in the FCS this year. Cam Miller wasn't. Kiko was. We had the best Swiss Army knife in the FCS this year. I mean, he's going to be a first-team All-American in Michael Wortham. We had Jared Taylor who can run the freaking ball. We had good players. We had the number 1 rated passing line, offensive line in the nation via PPF or PFF, whatever that is. I mean, that sets you up for success. The only difference is when one aspect wasn't working, instead of switching, because we are Swiss Army knife, we just kept trying to poke with that same aspect that's not working. And I just, I think there was games that we probably should have won if we switched the game plan instead of kept going through like the game plan. I feel like we prepped really well, but then if something wasn't working, we just stuck to what was the original game plan instead of making adjustments. And I think if we made some adjustments, this is a different Eastern team because the talent's there. We were competitive with every single team. I mean, that's a reality. We were competitive with every single team. But again, when you're not making adjustments and the other team is, it's probably an issue. And I think that falls back on the coaching staff. Of course, we still have the defensive issues. That didn't help. But to me, they looked better than last year. And the offense looked a lot better than last year, too. But it was just one of those things where, hey, we ran all over Idaho State. So we think we can run all over NAU, who's a top running defense in the nation, right? Instead of throwing it on him and trying to stretch the field. So I don't know. It's just, I wish we would have maybe made more adjustments in real time. And I think this could have been a different Eastern Washington team.
Right. So I want to talk to you about the defense for a little bit because that's the hey, Eastern's always going to be able to have some sort of success offensively. That is just who Aaron Best led teams are. That's what they're going to be. And the talent is clearly there. Next year, obviously looking forward, we lose everyone on the offensive line and a lot of production, but the defense is where I think Eastern is. That's going to make or break Eastern as a program. If the defense can be okay, that's when Eastern is able to really kind of turn into more of a winning team. We saw that during the Bill Baldwin years. They were never really elite or anything like that, but the years where the defense was okay, when they had a really good linebacker or something, they were able to make some serious noise in the playoffs. The years where the defense was just awful, Eastern was just losing games like that Montana game, 52-49. So the defense is interesting to me because it's for the most part, it's a really young unit. Eastern only loses 2 or 3 guys that played a lot of snaps, right? You lose Brock Harrison, you lose Matt Brown, you lose Cohen, and you lose potentially Amani Williams. He's a redshirt junior this year, but he did walk on senior day, which makes you think he's probably going. But other than that, man, you return a lot of people. And the thing with the defense for me this year, and my main take with them is it felt like the defense was Big Sky average or even maybe a tad better than Big Sky average for 80% of the snaps.
Yeah.
And those 20% of the snaps, Eastern was the worst defense in the country.
Yeah.
Which turned them into a bottom third defense because those plays that they gave up on those other plays were just massive plays. Eastern gave up a 92-yard touchdown this year. Just these massive backbreaking plays. In the NAU game, that was the difference. Eastern bit on trick
flicker
plays.
And then that reverse pass, the double pass, and no one was near him.
And it's just part of it comes down to the style of defense Eastern plays, right? They're really honestly running a 3-3-5 at this point, where they want to blitz, they want to cause chaos in the box, and they're playing a lot of man coverage on the back end. And that is what leads to those big plays is, hey, one guy gets beat and you're screwed because there's no one back there. Yeah. So, or another thing, with the 3-3-5, when you're blitzing, if someone blitzes a gap slightly wrong, giant running lane, and we gave up big touchdown runs to the Eli Gilman touchdown run, we were blitzing. And if the linebacker, instead of blitzing, twist blitzing, he just blitzes the gap in front of him, it's a 3-yard gain.
Right.
Instead, it's a 70-yard touchdown. So many plays like that where just little discipline things that you would hope in year 2 under a new defensive coordinator are things that get better. I am a little hesitant. I worry because I think the mentality with Coach Sanders is more of the, hey, we'll worry about fundamentals later. Let's just cause chaos, which didn't work very well this year, right? And to me, I felt like when Eastern went to those more base sets, they played better. They're more of a bend but don't break style of defense when it comes to the talent, in my opinion. I don't think we have lockdown man corners. I think we have talent out there. We had a lot of young talent in the secondary this year. But those guys, when you match them up with the best receivers in the league, those guys stood no chance. They're getting ran right by. That happened in the Davis game. That happened in the Montana State game. And I don't know. I think that this offseason we need to have some more reevaluating scheme-wise. But I think that Eastern has the guys that they need to be in a Big Sky average defense. And it's
Yeah,
just,
I mean,
can they execute in the future? We have to see that happen because it hasn't yet, right?
yeah. I mean, when you just look at it, I mean, Montana State's the number one offense in the nation, or right around there. We held our own. I mean, again, I'm not looking for this Eastern team to, hold everyone to 21 points. That's just not the reality. But I mean, we held our own. Last year's Montana State team, I mean, if they played last year's defense, they put up 50 pretty easily. They put up 60, I think, probably fairly easy. So there was moments of greatness. I agree. It was big plays. I mean, I would love to do the math and maybe go back, and I'm not doing it, but watch each single one and see how many of the touchdowns were just one giant play. Because I mean, I feel like we did pretty well holding them to, thirds. But there's still one thing we struggle at, and it is containing a mobile quarterback. I do think having a mobile quarterback, we can't. We don't know how to contain it. I mean, you saw that with Pennington. We saw that, with Malott. We saw that, with pretty much anyone we played who has a quarterback who can, move and get to the outside a little bit. It seems like we kind of struggled there. And, I don't know what the scheme would be to help change that outside of a spy. But then you probably lose that middle of the field, which we did quite a bit as well. So, but yeah, I mean, again, I thought the defense was actually fairly improved, especially because we were historically one of the worst defenses last year I've ever seen. So we weren't historically one of the worst defenses I've ever seen this year. It wasn't good, but there was moments of, I don't want to say greatness, but there was moments of solid. And I'll take moments of solid right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a legitimate chance that Eastern could have 2-3 guys in the all conference race on the defense side of the ball.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like a long shot when you look at the numbers, but Matt Brown caused chaos this year up front.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it doesn't show because, he's a D tackle for one. For two, like in the system that we ran, it's just like, oh, he's there, run the other way. Like stuff like that. You have a guy like Dejon Wells, like he led the league in TFL, or not TFLs, passes defended this year.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, for the most part this year, I mean, he had like one or two like breakdowns, but I mean, for the most part, he was a lockdown for us all year.
Yeah.
And we had, I mean, Derek Ganter is a guy that I think will be at least on the list for freshman of the year in the Big Sky. I don't think he'll win it, but he's up in the top 10 of tackles, right? And
yeah,
you don't want safeties being in your top 10 tackles, but Derek Ganter had some awesome success this year. Like there's guys there, there's pieces there. It's just putting it all together for 4 quarters and limiting the big plays. That's where, I think of an Idaho. I mean, there was years where they always have some guys, but like they don't have the best talent on defense. Or the last couple of years, like they didn't have the best talent on defense. Like when it came to just guys on guys. Yeah. But the way that they played very disciplined, and they played, hey, bend but don't break. Don't give up the big plays and we'll be all right. That's how they played, and it worked for them well enough to get them to quarterfinals. Like I think if Eastern adopts a little bit more of that mentality, I think it would help a ton.
Yeah.
Will that happen? I don't know. So
I mean, and we were arguably, I mean, you can say we were the number 6 team in the league. I get Idaho State's above us, but they're not. We saw that game live. Yeah. So I mean, we were. I do think NAU and everyone above is better than us, but Idaho State and everyone below was worse than us this year. So that is an improvement from last year.
Mm-hmm. So we'll get right to it. I mean, looking at last year, do you think, would you count this in your head as an improvement from last year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just because of how we played with some of the top tier teams. I get like that Fresno State game was awesome, but I mean, when you look at, that in Portland State game was embarrassing, and we didn't play the top 5 teams in the league last year, right? We didn't play all top 5 teams in the conference. We played them all. But look at that. Montana State, embarrassing. Montana State was better this year than they were last year.
Mm-hmm. Which, and I mean, I think there was some obvious improvement on both sides of the ball. I think there was improvements on both sides of the ball. The question is how much of that improvement just graduated. So, right. We'll kind of have to see as it goes on, right? All right. So we're gonna get some kind of Eagles Power Hour Player Awards. I'm gonna call it, but we're gonna kind of talk about some of the big names this year, and give them their flowers before we kind of turn the page, looking forward a lot more in the next year. But before that, we have a word from our sponsor, Walk On Apparel. The Eagles Power Hour is sponsored by Walk On Apparel. Walk On Apparel focuses on capturing Eastern's culture and traditions and apparel designs that are as different as they are affordable. Plus, 10% of the profit from every sale gets donated right back to the Eagle Athletic Fund. That's a win for you and your alma mater. EPH listeners get 10% off Eastern gear at checkout using code EPH10. That's EPH10. New designs drop throughout the season, so go check out walkon-apparel.com. And follow them on Twitter and Instagram to see what's dropping next. That's walkon-apparel.com. All right. Shout out to Walk On Apparel. They're awesome. All right. Eastern Player EPH Player Awards. Who is, when you look at the offense, who is your offensive player of the year this year?
I mean, I think this one's just the most no-brainer of all time. I mean, the GOAT Efton Chisholm the third. I mean, he had a historic season. I mean, it's up there with all the greats. I mean, he put up more receptions than Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp got to play a few more extra games in the season. Let's not be heisty about that. I mean, again, what Efton Chisholm was to do, he was our rock. Every single time we needed a third down, conversion, he was there. Every time we needed a big play, he was there. Anytime we needed to get back in the game, he was there. So what did he have? 120 receptions, 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns. So he led the nation in receptions. He led the nation in yards. And he was, one touchdown shy from the nation of getting that Triple Crown Award for the regular season. So, Efton Chisholm is a dog. He's not just the best player on our team. He is the best wide receiver in the nation, hands down.
Right. And kind of a crazy stat, he is fourth in all-purpose yards. And, the guys ahead of him, they catch balls, they run balls, and they return balls, and that's how they get their yards. All Chisholm did was catch balls. He had 60 punt return yards, and he had 1,300 yards. That's good enough for, when you look at the total, I think that's third in the country. Yeah, third in not in the country, excuse me, in the conference when it comes to all-purpose yards. Yeah. Guess who's number 2? Michael Wortham. Yeah, we'll probably get to him in just a minute.
100%.
I do want to give a big shout out. Efton Chisholm is my guy as well for player of the year, but I do want to give a huge shout out to the offensive line because, Eastern was the number 2 rushing offense in the league this year. Unless that changed from last week, but
sure, that
is huge. That was a huge improvement from last year. And I felt like on tape, it was night and day, the difference between last year and this year, the blocking on the second level by these guys. It sucks that they're all graduating at the same time. That is going to be really tough to replace. But that combined with, the rushing game in general, it was honestly, you had Chisholm that was amazing in the pass game. And other than that, it was run.
Yeah.
And Eastern had a lot of success doing that despite, there was, I don't necessarily know if Eastern had the most elite talent on the offensive line. These guys just played their butts off, and I got to give a huge shout out to those guys because I feel like they get. Everyone still thinks Eastern throws the ball a million times, and they don't.
No,
it was a running team
when they throw. Can we give a little shout out to Kylor? I think there was tremendous growth from last year to this year. Again, he was the most accurate quarterback in all of the FCS, completing almost 76% of his passes. He was efficient, and he was smart. That was the biggest thing. I think he learned to read a defense and make the smartest plays on the field. I still, even when we were effective, I still don't love the rotation. I think we got to keep him out there a little bit more, and I think we'd be a little more successful. But got to give him a shout out. I think he threw 2 picks all season. That's pretty dang elite. He was top 10 in the nation in efficiency, number 1 in accuracy. So, Kiko, as long as he stays, I think the future's bright. I think he's even going to have a much better year next year.
Right. And next year, important to note, of course, barring the transfer portal, which you always have to say nowadays, Nolan Olm redshirted this year. He was supposed to be gone. He's going to be back as long as everything works out right with the portal, Kiko stays, whatever. Miles Williams, I believe he also medically redshirted this year.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about our wide receiver room.
Right, like, they're gonna be back. Then,
Yeah,
like, a couple guys that kinda came out this year that played, they weren't necessarily, like, huge, but they played a lot of downs for us. Noah Cronquist, Wesley
yeah,
Garrett, and then the whole stable of freshmen that were freshmen this year that are gonna be they're guys that are going to be really good in the future. All of those guys have been waiting in the wings, and I think they're all gonna I think the receiver room might be more dynamic next year. There's no like Chisholm in the room necessarily. Like there isn't that like stud in the room, but
yeah,
a lot more balance because this year it was like a Chisholm and nobody else,
for
Joe.
sure.
It'll be a lot more balanced, and hopefully that means that Kikoa gets a little bit more rain to kind of distribute. Right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes there was some forcing it to Chisholm that caused problems, but I mean, yeah, it should be interesting. Got to keep him upright though. We'll
Yeah.
see how the offensive line goes, but let's shift it to the defensive side of the ball. Offense was awesome, but the defensive side of the ball, who would you say is your defensive player of the year? I've got like 3 guys in mind. I'm not sure who to pick.
So, I mean, I don't want to give my freshman also the defensive player of the year, but I thought
No.
Ganter Jr. actually is pretty dang deserving of having both. Um, Wells' stats aren't flashy, right? Just because people didn't really throw against him, and when they did, he just deflected it. So he doesn't have the tackles or the tackles for losses. But and then of course, like you said, Brown's caused chaos, and again, his stats aren't flashy in the grand scheme of things, but you could tell he was the leader out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna give my year award to the freshman, the redshirt freshman. I think what a breakout season Ganter Jr. had. I mean, as
Yeah.
long as again bearing the transfer portal, if he stays, he becomes an instant leader on this defense, and that is an exciting thing. I mean, I thought he played his ass off, so I'm actually going to give him the Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yeah, he played his ass off, and I mean he led the team in tackles. The next he had 95 total tackles. The next name, Kentrell Williams Jr. was 60, like
Yeah,
30 tackle difference. He was always on the field at the end of the year, which is something that with how the team was rotating players like that was pretty impressive to see him play like that. I'm gonna give my defense player of the year award to Matthew Brown, and
yeah,
he doesn't like have like eye popping stats, but like 42 tackles for a defensive tackle that is only on the field half the time is pretty damn impressive.
yeah,
He had 5 TFLs and 2 sacks on the year, 2 quarterback hurries in the stat book, and he had the safety in the NAU game. I got to give mine to Matt Brown. I think he was the most criminally underrated player in the conference the last 2 years. And I mean, last year he was getting nods from like, I know like the Blue Bloods guys, they gave him a nod like a third team All American. I think he's a guy that should pop up on an all conference team this year. And I think he might, I think like another All American team will probably give him a look just because he played his butt off this year, and
yeah,
I'm hoping he gets that appreciation because with how the defense played, sometimes they get a little overlooked. But and I mean another thing, like one of Eastern's best D tackles all year, Jacob Newsom was out like
mm-hmm.
basically the whole season. Matt Brown had to step up, and he did. I'm going to give mine to him. Very close second and third for Derek Cantor Jr. and Dejon Wells.
Yeah,
Dejon Wells was he was our most reliable guy on the back end.
yeah,
Ganter just made so many tackles. So uh, again, like a lot of individual like bright spots on the defense.
yeah,
A lot of talent and a lot of young guys. Like the amount of redshirt freshmen that played this year, I think there was 4 or 5 guys that got snaps in competitive close games. You got Landry, you got
yeah,
Zion Jones was in there for a number of snaps. You had Ganter, obviously, and then there was there's another secondary. Jalen Jenkins was another secondary guy that got snaps this year. Like the future is really bright there. Again, barring the transfer portal, you have to say
yeah.
that all the time, which I hate.
We
But
recruited extremely well the last year, especially with the DBs. I mean,
mhm,
that was probably the best class. We were talking about it, I think, in that preseason episode where we are like,
mhm,
man, our DBs, when you're looking at the recruiting and the talent we brought in, that was exciting. So
right.
it was cool to see, a lot of young people get snaps. But man, Ganter Jr., man, killing it.
Yep.
It's fun to
Well,
watch.
we'll roll this right into freshman of the year. I think we
All
both.
right, baby.
I think we're
Yeah, you
both.
already got my pick. I already said it. So what a cheat. I'm going Ganter Jr. again. I
Yep.
thought he was arguably the best freshman on the defensive side of the ball in all the conference. He was reliable. He was everywhere, and I think he could be a true leader. So I'm excited to see what the future holds if as long as he stays with the program.
Yeah, and he's been making plays for 2 years now. I mean,
Yeah.
he in his 4 games last year, he made a literal game-winning play against Weber State, and he's made a bunch of tackles this year. I'm hoping there's more improvement on the coverage side of things. Like that was where he had some issues sometimes, but also like he's more of a strong safety anyways. Like I think having safety support in the box is important if you're going to stop the run well. You look at any like good run defense. Like obviously the linebackers take the brunt of it, but you got to have safety help as well. Having a guy like him is really important if you're going to improve that run defense, which I feel like the run defense took a huge step this year. Like they're still gave up yards, but those yards were coming on way less, chunk and chunk and chunk, which was the case last year. I just think Derek Ganter Jr. had a huge part to play in that, and so he's going to get my freshman of the year. Roll it into special teams player of the year. Again, I think it's an obvious one.
Yeah, this one is a no-brainer. I'll let you say the name because, yeah, this one's a no-brainer for sure.
Right. It's Michael Wortham. Michael Wortham had over 1,000 return yards on the year, kick return yards.
Yeah.
And he single-handedly got himself up in the all-purpose yardage with kick returns. Like he had 5-ish hundred, 6-ish hundred yards from scrimmage, it kind of split between runs and passes. And then he had 1,000 plus kickoff return yards. Every time he got a chance, you were wondering if he was going to go 40 yards. Took one back this year, which was awesome. But he's just that guy that you're like, man, I wish we could have used him more because he's a senior this year. But got to give it to Mike Wortham Jr.
Yeah, I mean, he's not just, again, Eastern's special teams player of the year. He is going to be the FCS special teams player of the year. I mean, when the stats are done, he is first team All-American, 100%. The best returner in the nation. And again, it's we're not just using him as a returner. He had passing touchdowns. He had rushing touchdowns. He had receiving touchdowns. This guy is not just a special teams player, but as just a special player. He's fun to watch. He is a special weapon that is pretty rare to see at this level. He could do it all. I mean, he really can do it all. And he played tons of snaps. I mean, there was times where we had 3 quarterbacks out of the backfield at the same time. And you just never knew. You're like, as long as Wortham's out there, you don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it's a reverse. We don't know if he's going to throw. We don't know if he's going to run. I mean, it was fun to see. So, special teams, special players, Michael Wortham.
Right. Gonna miss Mike. He feels like a guy that we could have used so much more. That's like, man, I wish we had another year with him. That wraps it up for our EPH awards, which are just kind of goofy, but it's just to give some guys their flowers on the year because it's, I think it's valuable to remember these guys because I mean, a lot of them they're not back next year. So, looking forward now a little bit. We're just gonna touch on it for maybe 5-10 minutes here.
Okay.
We'll go offensively and defensively. What's the biggest thing you want to see improve next year? And what's the thing that you're maybe worried about when it comes to the offensive side of things? We'll do first.
Yeah, the offensive side of the ball, and you touched on this, is I'm very little. I don't want to say very because we've been historically really good at this position. And if there's one position that Aaron Best knows better than anything else, it is O-line. And he has done a dang good job producing O-line after O-line after O-line after O-line. But we lose everyone. I mean, that is something where we're not going to have a lot of snaps next year. And the good news is, we have a few weapons on, the offensive side of the ball that can maybe help with the pressure. But that is something where, especially the first few games of next year, it may struggle, especially running the ball. We may struggle having time to have a wide receiver, actually get some distance between their DBs. So, I would say on the offensive side of the ball, I'm excited. I think we got some talent. And again, this is a position that Aaron Best knows better than any other position. And if he's going to focus something, it is going to be on the offensive line. So that's where I'm excited. But to say I'm not nervous about it would just be a flat out lie to your face.
Right. I mean, one thing with the offensive line this year is like 2 or 3 of those guys have been starting on the line for like 3-4 years. So it's going to be a lot of new faces for people that pay attention. Luckily, I mean, that's my biggest concern offensively as well. luckily we did a pretty good job of picking up some experienced guys, some guys that have some sort of, whether it be junior college, whether it be experience at another place. Like we have David Shin is a junior college guy that has experience. He played at Utah Tech, went to junior college, came back. Like he's a guy with experience that was in the wings this year. He's going to be, I believe, he'll be a senior next year and getting his first experience at Eastern. And there's a number of other guys. Plus, like Mark Johnson is a guy from Canada, offensive lineman that he's a true freshman this year. Next year, it would not shock me if he takes someone's job. He was on the two deeps this year as a true freshman,
Nice.
and if he gets a whole nother offseason of development, like he's a guy that I think could absolutely be the next like big hitter. Another guy, Dylan Connor, was a guy that we talked about coming into the year. He dealt with injuries this year that really kind of hampered his season. If he, when he's back and he's healthy, he is a guy that has that high ceiling as well. That can, I think, is a guy that can really be a rock at the left tackle spot maybe next year. We'll kind of see. I don't really know where everyone's gonna be, but a lot of new faces. That's a big position group to keep an eye on in fall camp or spring ball and fall camp next year that I will be keeping a pretty close eye on as well. So what's the biggest thing?
I was going to say, I'm excited to at least see the new faces on the wide receiving group. I mean, we're not going to see a lot of new faces, but there's a lot of freshmen that were really talented that I think can make an immediate step up. I mean, there's a couple guys where I go, yeah, they could be a stud. But I mean, we lose Efton Chisholm. That is a big loss. That's the biggest loss in the country. But that wide receiver group is extremely talented. And as long as our O-line can give, Kiko a little bit of time, I think we're going to have an exciting, dynamic wide receiving group.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think there's a lot of dynamic guys underneath the guys that have been here for a while. You're going to have Nolan, who's going to be your steady player. You're going to have Miles that hopefully is finally hopefully he can stay healthy next year.
Yeah.
And then after that, you have like 5 different guys that you can rotate. And I think they're all going to give you the same the same production, which should be really fun. You got a guy like Aiden Gutierrez, who he was a true freshman last year, sued for a couple games. He was on the 2 deep when Eastern's dealing with injuries. You got Jackson Branch, like a big time recruit. There's other guys that are there that, it wouldn't shock me to see him play. You got Stelly. I can't even remember his full name. I just know him as Stelly. Marcellus Honeycutt.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guys. But Honeycutt's a guy that has made some huge plays in practices that you wonder if, he's a guy that takes a bigger role. You also have the junior college Jalen Garrison from last year, like super athlete. A lot of places where Eastern's going to be able to pull that weapon out of nowhere that nobody expected, and I'm sure that'll be the same thing. Running back room, I believe, is back. I don't know about Tuna, but I believe Malik Dotson's back.
Yeah.
And you also have like younger guys that Marcisietz showed some bright spots. Talon Betts showed a little bit of bright spots this year. Like there's a lot of young guys. I think next year is going to be a lot more of a young team. Like this year is a pretty senior laden team. Next year is going to be a younger team. Wouldn't shock me to see some mistakes, but also it's like, hey, maybe getting these younger guys is that spark that you needed to get over the hump. Maybe it is.
Yeah.
You never know. Defensively, let's just generally talk about defense. What are you hoping to see next year?
I want to keep seeing, improvements on the rushing defensive side, right? At the end of the day, I mean, we weren't a dynamic rushing defensive team, right? We still gave up quite a bit of yards, but we gave up 100 yards less than the year prior. If you're asking most teams if they gave up 100 yards less, how would they feel? They'd be like, oh, we're one of the best rushing defenses in the nation. So the difference is we were so historically bad the season prior that, 100 yards still puts us as one of a bottom 30. But, that just gives me hope for the future because we do have a lot of young guys on the defensive side. We have, I think, a culture shift on the defensive side of the ball. I just want to see them keep improving, keep playing hard. This was the hardest playing defense I've seen in a long time. I mean, they were amped up. This is a team that never gave up. And it seems like they kind of got stronger in the back half of the game, which was kind of surprising because that's normally where we were like, we played really well in the first half and then we were exhausted, right? We didn't have the talent to keep up. We didn't have the depth to keep up. I think we kind of did for the most part. I think at the end of the game, they were a little bit stronger. So I'm excited to see, what the defense can do next year, especially in the run, because I think this league is very run happy too. The Big Sky is very run oriented first outside of UC Davis. Everyone else is very run oriented in Idaho State. So, if we can, maybe not an extra 100 yards next year, but if we can slow down and improve by another 50 yards, now we're in the ballpark of being a very middle of the road rushing defensive team, and that's what excites me.
Right. And I feel like a big part of that is just to slow down the giant gash runs. Like
Yeah.
The 10-yard runs play after play after play, like that hasn't been Eastern's problem this year. It hasn't really happened. Really, I don't think anyone did it to us. Montana State did for a little bit. Southeastern Louisiana did a little bit, and Nevada did a little bit, but they did it in a little different way. Like it wasn't like the physicality was so much better this year on the defensive side of things. It wasn't a physicality problem. It was more of wrong gap, undisciplined, bad leverage, stuff like that. It's all coachable. Like it's all coachable things that you really hope another full offseason. Those are things that improve. We've been saying that for a couple years now. So, we're really hoping that the discipline has to be better because I look at a team like you said, like Idaho, like they flip that discipline in an offseason.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that, or kind of flip the discipline in an offseason, but a lot of it changed in an offseason. I'm hoping that can be one of the things that we look at in self-scout at the end of the year on the coaching staff side of things. Like I think these are things that we need to work on more. And we just did not force turnovers at all this year.
No, that was shocking because even like our good defenses. So I'm always thinking about like 2010, even 2018. We gave up yards. It was a bend don't break, but we created massive amount of turnovers. That's what really separated us from maybe the other previous defenses in like 14 or 15 where we just didn't have the turnovers. This is one where the turnovers were almost non-existent, and that was a big difference for us in a negative way. If we can bend and give up, an extra 50 yards a game, but create a few turnovers, like in 2010, I think we led the nation in turnovers. 2018 was up there too.
Yep.
That's a whole different dynamic with this defense.
Right. And I think a big part of that was we played a ton of man this year. Like we're blitzing and playing a ton of man. Again, it's a scheme thing. I think you just chill out with the man and the blitzing a little bit. And I think more turnovers come. I think people always associate blitzing with turnovers, but it's like, hey, if all your guys are locked up man on man, nobody's looking for the ball. Like if a quarterback makes a really dumb throw over the middle, everyone's looking at the receiver. None of them are looking at the ball. And so if you have more eyes on the ball, more eyes on the receiver, that's when those turnovers come usually. That happens when you play zone. And I felt like we played better when we played zone. So I'm hoping to see more. I feel like always people are like, we need to blitz more. We're playing too soft. And I'm like, please play a little bit softer. I just don't want to give up touchdowns every, you play 8% really good snaps, then you give up touchdowns on like 4 50-yard plus plays.
I also think the offensive lines in the Big Sky were actually pretty good this year. I think a lot of teams improved on the offensive, line side of the ball. So when we're blitzing, it also created quite a bit of gaps for that quarterback to run. Yeah. That's a big thing because we weren't as effective, sacking as much as I would have loved. But I think if we stop blitzing a little bit to counter you, that probably slows down Pennington's option of having some of these giant open holes. Because, of course, you're blitzing, you get a little scared, so you're not looking downfield. And, hey, you know what? Here's a nice little hole. And, again, no one's looking for the ball. No one's looking at the runner. No one's looking at the quarterback. So, yeah, actually, that's probably right.
Which, that's a big thing that I feel like it's been a pattern the last couple of years. It's, hey, when Eastern blitzed, like in 23, when Eastern blitzed, they got torched.
Yeah.
When Eastern blitzed in 24, they got torched in different ways. Like third down, the first half of the year, every single third down, it felt like we blitzed and played man coverage. And for whatever reason, every time a freaking slant over the middle or a little swing screen to the outside would turn into this huge 10 plus yard gain.
Yeah.
And I felt like we went away from that a little bit later in the year. And that's when we started having success against, like Idaho, Montana State. We didn't do that as much. and we had a little bit of success with it. Davis still was there a little bit. Like Montana was there. The first half they did it. The second half they chilled out with it, and that's when Eastern made the comeback. Like I feel like the film and the self-scout is there for me to feel like, hey, maybe we relax a little bit with the pressure, the man. That's one of the things I'm hoping to see next season, but also like, we never know. Could be a totally different situation next year. That's a long ways away. It could be a totally different group of guys like with this era of football. Luckily, like that's one of the great things about Coach Best is like we have not had turnover, like really
not a lot
at all. At least on the player side of things. The staff, we've seen some turnover for sure, but it has been seriously impressive. Like, a lot of people, you go into the offseason and the first thing you're assuming is like, all right, who all are we losing to the portal? I feel like I don't have that thought. Like, I don't necessarily, I think I do to an extent. Like, I wonder who's leaving, but it's not like, oh, Chiz is gone. Like, I didn't have that thought after the end of the year. I was like, Chisholm seems like an Eastern guy. He seems like a guy that likes it here. Like we've had that uniquely, I feel like, in this era of college football. And I think that's really important moving forward. And I think the stability is really important moving forward. You don't want to be stably bad, but having a stable force at head coach, like one of the big positives is like with the craziness that's happening in the FBS and all the weird landscape realignment stuff going on, I feel like it is a good time to have a stable force at leading your program, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up here?
No, just congrats on the season. I appreciate all of what you're doing. It's a fun daily listen when I'm on my flights. So I travel every single week. So, of course I have to lean in and listen to Patty here. So I think you did a great job, and it's not the season we were hoping for, right? But hey, it's the season we got, and it is what it is. So,
hey man, football is football, and you can never be mad when football is happening. Yeah. Enjoy, go watch the playoffs and enjoy it, because the freaking 8 months of the year that we don't have football suck.
100%. I was sure. I'm like, is it basketball season yet? But no, I miss football season. I already miss it today.
So. Right, me too. It's weird not having a pregame to think about. Sucks. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Kind of putting a bow on the 2024 football season. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing for football offseason episodes. I know I'm going to be doing some recruiting stuff. If we have some big news, like, I don't know, shifts on the coaching staff, which I'm not expecting to see, but, usually there's always one or two. We'll throw it into something. Planning on doing weekly-ish basketball updates. We'll kind of see. We'll kind of feel it out. Football was my main one that I really want to do weekly. And so basketball last year was a lot. So, I'm gonna probably have to lighten up, because being a biology major is a big ass time commitment. So we're gonna probably have to lighten up the load of episodes for a little bit this winter, but still gonna try to get an episode out a week. We'll see. But I think that's all we got, guys. Sweet. Thanks everyone for listening, and go Eags.